Thank you. You forgot to say former Bangalore boy. Current Bangalore boy. Right. May I invite the man who describes himself as an IITian, a Harvard man, a philanthropist, a global icon, a convicted felon, and now author, Rajat Gupta. Okay, Rajat, I'm slightly embarrassed that I'm more dressed than you. I read in your book that your standard routine was to wake up in the morning, suit up, and get to work. So I thought I should match you suit for suit.
If I had told me, I would have put on a suit, but I thought everybody is informally dressed and I should follow suit.
All right, follow suit. All right, so this audience in Bangalore, many of them may not understand a few basic terms. Shall we do a quick, snappy answers to stupid questions to start with?
Please.
Right, these are some of the terms you'll hear in the day. So Rajat Gupta, what is insider trading? A short answer.
There is no short answer to that question.
All right. So fundamentally, if I can summarize, if you buy or sell shares in the stock market with information that you're not supposed to have, which is only privy to insiders in a company, would that be a
I think that's a fair
succinct
thing.
definition?
Well, actually, the legal definition is one part is that.
Okay.
The second part is actually you should have a quid pro quo arrangement that you actually benefit.
The insider benefits from the
insider
trade.
information. And the third is that you should have criminal intent when you pass the information.
All right.
Those are the three definitions.
All right. For those of you who are going to pick up this book, you're going to see the word SEC or Securities Exchange Commission. What does the SEC do briefly?
SEC is the same as SEBI here, basically regulates.
SEBI monitors the stock market, monitors people who trade in the market,
Yeah.
and hopefully catches insiders and people who do insider trading. Rajat, what is a hedge fund? How is it different from a mutual fund? Many of us own mutual funds. Very few of us own a hedge fund.
I think it's a kind of a generic term, but basically it means that it is neutral to the direction of the market. Theoretically, it means neutral to the direction of the market, which means that they go long and short and typically hedge their positions.
So if there's an IPL match today, and if I bet you that Bengaluru is going to win, and I bet three other people that Bombay is going to win, am I hedging
You're
my
a hedge
bet?
fund, yeah.
I'm a hedge fund, okay. So if you make two simultaneous bets about who's going to win and who's going to lose, and that's perfectly legal to do.
Yes.
It's
yes,
perfectly legal
yes,
to do.
yes.
All right, so those are the basic terms. Keep those terms in mind while we start the interview. All right, sorry, I have one more question. What do consultants like McKinsey really do? People build companies, people run companies, and people who run those companies pay you lots of money to tell them how to run those companies.
I am sure there are many, many McKinsey clients in this audience.
Okay?
So they will probably be able to answer that question.
But you did head
But
McKinsey globally.
I did head
So you
McKinsey
should be able to tell us what consultants do.
I can. Basically, the serious answer is we get advice to clients of their top management concerns. It can be any particular area, and hopefully we give them advice that creates long-term performance improvement. That's kind of a serious answer.
All right.
Words using that actually you say, what the hell does that mean? But it means many different things in many different situations.
That's a working answer for now. We'll ask you more questions as the interview goes on. Right, let's delve a little bit into the history. You'll see a lot of it in the book. You went from a middle-class family or a lower middle-class family to IIT Delhi, to Harvard, to joining McKinsey, to being the first non-American and certainly the first Indian to head McKinsey worldwide, after which you served on the boards of many Fortune 500 companies, some of the best companies in the world. You were the originator and participated in multiple philanthropic causes, and including causes like the setting up of the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. So Rajat, if you were to identify the secret of your extraordinary success, what would it be about you that made you so successful?
Well, I think it's primarily trusting in people, making other people successful, and believing in them. So if you do that, then, the one model is you say, I can do everything, I'm the smartest guy around, and you drive it. The other model is you find a hell of a lot of smart people, and you trust in them. And in turn, they will make you much more successful than you ever dream of, or you could ever do yourself.
Speaking of being successful, I read maybe it's rumor, maybe it's a report, that the five richest people in America, 5 or 6 richest people in America, made more money in the first week of this year than the bottom 50 is going to make in the rest of the year, right? You advise a lot of these companies, and the owners of many of these companies are extraordinarily wealthy people. Would you say that the American form or the Western form of capitalism is broken with this kind of income and wage and wealth inequality? Is it an unsustainable system?
I think in the long term it is, if we don't watch out for the growing income inequality around the world. It's true everywhere. It's certainly true here. It's true in America. I think that, in a way, some of the changes that have happened, certainly in the US lately, have added to that problem. In fact, business or all of that works with the permission of society. So if you don't look after the long-term good of society, you will cease to exist or you will not be legitimized. Your mandate comes from society. It is in their self-interest to make sure that there is better equal income distribution. Most importantly, there is a social safety net that is very important in most places. And social safety nets are eroding around the world. I think that it is not sufficient to say that without the kind of capitalistic incentive that is there, that businesses won't get formed, etc. I don't believe that. I also believe in strong regulation so that there's an even playing field rather than any kind of crony capitalism, which in many ways is also growing and some of the fastest growing economies in the world. Certainly you can say that about China, you can probably say that about India, etc. You know it better than I do. So all of these things are very important, I believe. I also think that it was true in the US very much from the very beginning. Very, very successful business people became great philanthropists also, from the tradition of Rockefeller to, they created great institutions. University of Chicago was created by a single grant from Rockefeller of $100 million 100 years ago. And it's become a great institution. If I look at anybody, one of the most successful people, capitalists successful in the world is Bill Gates. And I actually admire him much more for his philanthropy and what he's doing than, of course, even creating Microsoft. I think the impact that in the long term the Gates Foundation will have is going to, far outweigh the good that Microsoft even created in creating an industry.
And is the fact that you need to give back to society, that sort of moral imperative enough? Should it be legislated that companies have to give back this much? Because in India, we do have legislation that companies have to invest a certain percentage of their post-tax profits into what is called CSR in India. So should it be mandated or should it be voluntary and out of the goodness of your corporate heart?
Well, I don't think they're either or. I mean, obviously there is some kind of mandatory scheme that we have here is good. And I think some of the CSR activities are very good, although it's tiny, as I understand. It's small.
Microscopic.
It's very small.
Other than Azim Premji, microscopic.
Yeah. So I would say that, legislation of that kind is a form of taxation. You might as well do a better form of taxation than you have. Part of the problem is right now, if you look at the recent tax reform, so-called reform in the US, basically gave a huge amount of money back to the corporates, and that doesn't necessarily, they didn't reinvest or anything. It's not like jobs are going up. So I think by and large, this particular round of tax reform, I wouldn't personally support. But I would say the first thing is to create a even playing field. And the second thing is actually in society to value the contributions that are made by people who make society work, whether it's teachers or whether it's, many professionals, the arts, the humanities, all that. It's strange things have happened. Like in the US, they hardly pay their teachers at all. And yet a financial analyst who's just moving money around or commenting on it
Or
gets
hedge
paid,
fund managers.
or hedge fund managers
Make extraordinary amounts of money for
extraordinary
doing.
amount of money for just, it's something wrong with society when you don't reward people who are the building blocks of society, like teachers, as much as you reward.
So Warren Buffett very famously said that his secretary pays more tax than he does, and that came to be called the Buffett tax, to increase the tax on the wealthy. And clearly that's not happening in America, and it's unlikely it'll happen in India. In India, another problem that we have is wealth keeps concentrating in the same families because of inheritance. We don't have family institutions, we don't have philanthropic trusts because money gets passed from parents to children and concentrates in those families. Do you think a stiff inheritance tax and death duties will fix the problem for India somewhat?
Well, I think US perhaps is the most philanthropic society in the world. There's no doubt about the amount of transfer that happens in philanthropy. They are very giving at all levels, the very rich as well as the average middle-class families. There's a giving tradition. The tax code certainly helps. There's no question about the deduction you can take as well as the inheritance taxes. When you have very high inheritance tax like the US has, which is about 50%, you're incentivized, instead of passing even more to your children or heirs, you give a lot of it away. I think it should be there. It shouldn't be necessarily the whole point is to keep equalizing, to have incentives to create wealth, to create institutions, jobs, industry, etc., but at the same time to keep equalizing in a way.
Okay, Rajat, we're getting back to the story and the trial. I know everybody's waiting for questions on that. All right, after 30 years of corporate, philanthropic and other kinds of success, you were convicted by a jury of insider trading in the year 2012. You spent 2 years from 2014 to 16 approximately in various American prisons, minimum security and a more serious security prison. And the man who prosecuted you was also a man of Indian origin, Preet Bharara. There's lots been written about the two of you. In your view, is the fact that both of you were Indians give a special sort of impetus to your prosecution, that you were Indian, Preet was Indian, and that you must be made an example of? In your view, was that a special impetus?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I think that really the underlying force behind this was twofold. One is prosecutors have unchecked powers, and you find prosecutorial excess in many prosecutors in the US and in many situations. That's a fundamental problem with the justice system in the US, because they're typically political animals. They count wins, not anything else, not search for truth, but wins. And that's how they are evaluated by the world at large, and that's how they want to represent themselves and stand for political office, etc. The other issue here was that the US in the financial crisis had the worst crisis of a generation, or more than a generation. In 50 years, since the Depression, there was no crisis like, financial crisis like the one that happened in 2008. Lots of people lost their jobs. Lots of people lost their pensions, lost their homes. Enormous amount of anger built in society. Now, through that early period after the crisis, they could not hold accountable anyone who was the real culprit of the financial crisis.
Who were the real culprits?
I'll tell you, they were primarily the banks, the mortgage lending companies, the rating companies, a whole bunch of them. Now, what did they do? They fined them billions of dollars. In fact, they admitted wrongdoings and fraud. The institutions paid huge fines, which of course were paid by the shareholders. Yet no leader in any of those institutions was brought to justice. So there was this public outcry or angst about how can this be that these institutions have done all these bad things. Institutions don't do bad things. People in them do bad things, and yet no one was held accountable. And yet, therefore, there's a book that has been recently written called The Chicken Shit Club. And the Chicken Shit Club is about prosecutors who only prosecute those that they think they can get. So the prosecutors never touch the very powerful, the people who really caused their greed caused the.
And are you counting yourself amongst the not so powerful?
Yes, I am. But no, I am. But that's neither here nor there. But all I'm saying is that was the prime driving force to get behind hedge funds. The hedge funds didn't cause the financial crisis. They're a tiny player in the whole scheme of things. And frankly, if you look at it to this day, almost no one who actually is responsible for the financial crisis was ever prosecuted.
Okay. Rajat, McKinsey is the world's leading management consulting firm. You are hired specifically for your good judgment and objectivity in many situations. Companies hire you. And yet you claim in your book, and I'm quoting from what you said that you're naive, you've been called too trusting, and that you made serious errors of judgment, including the fact that you didn't testify in court. How can a person who rose up the ranks of McKinsey with such extraordinary judgment over a 30-year period also claim to be naive, trusting, and make such serious errors of judgment almost in a systematic manner? So much so that I think the judge or somebody else called you the most unluckiest man in the world?
The prosecutor did.
Prosecutor.
Yeah. And perhaps he was right. But, I didn't say I was naive in business matters. I said I didn't have bad business judgment. I gave sound advice to my clients. They came back to me again and again. So I believe I was a pretty good consultant throughout my life, 30 years.
And yet the dichotomy?
So the dichotomy is, McKinsey is a very special environment. You're right in saying it's the world's best consulting firm. I believe so. We have the best talent. And when you operate in an organization that is one of the few remaining global partnerships, okay? When you operate in that environment, which is actually quite collaborative and very meritocratic, and people are extraordinarily talented, you develop a very trusting mode of people. So I'm very trusting of people. So in that sense, I'm very naive in the sense of there is another world out there which I never had to interact with. That was the only job I ever had in my life. And I was naive about that. In terms of misjudgments, I never even consulted a lawyer ever before in my life. I was never sued anybody, never was sued by anyone, nothing. So I had no exposure to the legal system. So I didn't know how to judge it, what to do. I was a consultant all my life. I expected my clients to listen to me when I gave advice. So I was completely out of my depth in this legal matter. So in the end, against my instincts, I had to trust my lawyers. I said, I've hired them. They're supposed to be very good lawyers. I have to trust them.
All right, a key figure in your life was a man named Rajaratnam. He's a hedge fund manager who ran Galleon, for those of you who don't know. He managed some investments of yours. You invested early on. It showed some promise and success. You invested a little more. You had some misgivings between those two phases of investments. And he's currently in jail for 11 years, convicted of insider trading. In your view, is Rajaratnam guilty?
In my view,
of the crimes that he's convicted of?
I would say yes. I also would say that, unfortunately, insider trading or information, let me not say insider trading, information flow is highly prevalent in the financial industry. And many of it can be interpreted as insider trading. So it's not like Rajaratnam was the only guy sort of trading on information. That's their business. They try to find information and trade on it. You know, interesting examples. For example, they work on minute information. The day, which I was found shocking, the day that the Warren Buffett investment was announced in the end, the board meeting was scheduled, extraordinary board meeting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Right after 1 o'clock, Goldman stock started moving up. The board meeting hadn't even happened. So obviously there is some information going around that board meeting has been scheduled.
And that's enough to move the market up or down?
Market ups and down. And that's in confidential information, that the board meeting is scheduled is confidential. So obviously, you know, another example in my own case was P&G Smucker's deal. Well, they had to actually prepone the deal because already so much information had leaked out.
Whispers.
So, was he guilty of insider trading? I think yes. And part of it is based on, there were 20 plus cases related to Galleon and Rajaratnam. As we discovered in the trial, in every instance, except mine, there was a quid pro quo. There was an arrangement. There was money transferred.
So in effect, he was paying or bribing the people who gave him insider information?
So that itself tells me that there's the quid pro quo, tells me that it meets the definition of insider trading.
Excuse me. So Rajat, sorry to belabor the point. Not only did you invest in a fund that he was running, you also contemplated a business partnership with him when you started a private equity firm called New Silk Route. There was plans for cross-holding, that you would be the chairman of two companies. One would be run by a colleague of yours or a subordinate of yours, and one would be run by Rajaratnam, and you would be his boss or his chairman. It seems hard to believe that over a 2-3 period that you couldn't get a measure of the man, that he was fundamentally a crook. Could you explain what happened in those intervening years? That you dealt with him, you had misgivings when you invested the first time, and he told you that you can't invest at that valuation, you need to change. You admit that you had misgivings, and you say that he approximately squandered $10 million of yours, which is a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And yet, you persisted in almost starting a business partnership with him. This, I imagine, would baffle the jury, would baffle all of us, would baffle anybody.
No, you got some of the timing off. Let me just explain it. The first investment you're talking about was a passive investment on my part. I mean, I had a friend named Ravi Trehan and Rajaratnam. Both were investment managers. They managed money for other people. And so we decided to form this little fund owned by the three of us. And they were going to manage the funds, and I was just a passive investor. I have done many passive investments. This was one more like that. And I had an option to invest more. But let me not get into that and say this. It is very easy to have revisionist history. Now Rajaratnam is being vilified everywhere, probably justifiably so. But the fact is that he was a Wall Street star. Before I made this investment, I checked with Hank Paulson, who was a very good friend of mine, head of Goldman. I said, how is Rajaratnam? You know, I'm going to give him a fetch, $5 million at that time, fair amount of money for me. So I asked him, and he said, he's absolutely one of the stars in the industry. Quite extraordinary. And same is true with Gary Cohn, who was the president of Goldman. His reputation was stellar. You know, financial guys, all of them, all the hedge fund managers have some sharp elbows and so on, and they are tough negotiators. But that's true of everybody. Other than that, he was a star. But now, revisionist history he's a villain. So, doing business with him, we were going to form this private equity firm, which originally was going to be both a private equity and a hedge fund kind of thing for investing in India. And we were going to be one firm, then he didn't want to do it. Then we were going to do cross-holding, and he didn't want to do that in the end either. So, it didn't happen. But all of this was before I discovered the 10 million loss, okay?
Okay.
By the time that happened, which was in the summer of 2008, we were no longer really on talking terms.
And yet you didn't sue him. You didn't report him to the SEC. You didn't sue him.
No, I didn't sue.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a significant wiretap. He's heard telling you that he pays a former McKinsey man who's presumably an inside informant, Anil Kumar, who was a former colleague of yours. And he says, I'm paying him $1 million for almost doing nothing.
Yeah.
And you seem to say, yes, I know, you're being too generous.
Yeah.
And this tape is a matter of record. It's there in your book. Wouldn't you report him to the SEC or the relevant authorities at that time, when he seems to be indulging in insider trading?
No, not at all. See, you're taking juxtaposition two conversations. When that conversation happened, Rajaratnam was never accused of insider trading or anything. Rajaratnam and Anil Kumar were very good friends. Rajaratnam did a lot of good things for Anil, supported him. His son was born with some
With a
issues,
disability, and you've said that.
And so he helped settle his son, and who was a brilliant guy, by the way, and doing very well. And Rajaratnam wanted to hire Anil, and Anil wanted to work with him. They would have constant conversations. You know, I was a common friend, so they would tell me all these things. But they were both of a kind where you never could believe what was being said. So one day he was joining them, one day he wasn't, etc. So when that conversation happened, it didn't, it was, Rajaratnam was perfectly capable of giving his friend $1 million just for nothing. I had absolutely no clue that he was doing insider trading. So part of the problem was that the prosecutors started twisting all this. And by the way, there is no policy. Why should McKinsey people got mad at me because I didn't tell them. I said, firstly, I didn't know. I would have to verify that. Secondly, I didn't pay much attention to it. It was like, okay, because Rajaratnam was a man of exaggeration at many times. I didn't even believe him. Now, why should I go around check? It's his business if he gives Anil Kumar $1 million, And there was no policy in McKinsey against Rajaratnam paying Anil $1 million. It was inconsequential to me, honestly, and it was made out to be a big deal later on.
Rajat, you seem to have a fairly open disdain for both the American legal system and specifically the jury system. And I'm going to quote your words. You said your jury had 12 people. Amongst them was a librarian, a school teacher, and a beauty consultant. Do you think crimes like insider trading or accusations like insider trading or trials for financial crimes should be presided or judged by a jury of experts? Should you have specialist juries? Is the jury system broken?
Well, in the Constitution, it says a jury of peers. Okay?
Is it time to change that?
No. Jury of peers. Mark the word peers. So generally, these crimes were of a general societal murder or a robbery or whatever, right? And it affects society in general, and anybody can be a peer in that sense. They can judge whether you killed somebody or you didn't kill somebody. In financial crimes like insider trading, I sat through the trial. The government took 3 weeks to put their case on. 2.5 weeks was boring like hell. Nobody could understand anything. It was a little bit, it's like boredom punctuated by moments of excitement. When they played some tape or something, the jury, otherwise they were bored. They didn't understand.
It's not like what we see on TV?
It's not like
this
what we see.
Thriller minute, shocking 1 hour, the prosecution wraps.
It's not. So You know, the jury, I would say, didn't quite appreciate. And the prosecution did an excellent job, and my defense lawyers didn't do that good a job, okay? That's also there. Secondly, I didn't testify. All of that said, so, you know, I don't necessarily blame the jury, but I do think there is some major flaw in the jury system. I have many medical doctors, they go into malpractice suits. The jury can't understand anything of what is being discussed, whether it was a real malpractice or it wasn't. They're not qualified to do that. And yet they give away, you know, pass judgment on. So yes, some reform of the jury system is probably needed.
Rajat, have you seen a TV show called Billions?
I've never seen it, but I've heard about it.
It's okay. It's it's the fictional account of the fight between Preet Bharara and a hedge fund manager. There's lots of spot the game of real life equivalent that you
I
can
think it's
play.
based on Steve Cohen.
Steve Cohen, yeah. And Wall Street execs in the show are shown as completely contemptuous and sneering of regulators. In one scene, he says, okay, this much fine, that's my 1 day's trading, take the money. Right? And therefore, the US attorneys are extremely tough when it comes to prosecuting these guys, saying that you're insulting us constantly. Is that how it's in real life? Are Wall Street execs contemptuous of regulations and US attorneys and anything that they see restricting their power?
Well, I mean, you can look at it another way. You know, if the banks who got away with all the things they did and caused the financial crisis by paying a few $1 billion, and the prosecutors let them do that, okay? What are the bankers supposed to believe?
That we can get away with this, we'll just throw a little money their way?
Exactly.
You're more than a little upset with McKinsey for A, removing your name from the alumni list and disowning you quite sharply. Wouldn't you have done the same thing if you were the head of McKinsey and a former managing director was accused of the crimes that you were accused of?
No, absolutely not. Let me clarify by saying, first I must acknowledge, I owe a great deal to McKinsey. It was my only employer. I worked there for 37 years. Whatever I am professionally is because of McKinsey. And I, in turn, gave my all to McKinsey. I believe I moved McKinsey in ways that have made it a lasting impact and been very successful. What really hurt me is that, well, firstly, the alumni point is a very small point. You know, if you're an alumni, you are an alumni. Just because you take me out of the directory doesn't mean I'm not.
Okay.
So that was a kind of a silly thing on their part. And you know, after spending 37 years, it doesn't make any sense. And they didn't take anybody else. They didn't take Anil Kumar out.
Even though he admitted to insider trading.
He admitted to a crime he didn't take. And there have been others. And if I were managing director at that time, I would not take somebody out of the alumni directory for sure. Secondly, you know, when they took actions against me, I, in fact, called the managing partner of McKinsey, Dominic Barton, 2 days before the charges would come because I came to know that it would happen. I told him I am resigning from, I was still a consultant to them. I was not employed, I was still a consultant. I said, I retired. So I said, I'm resigning from the consult. He said, no, just go on leave of absence. And I said, no, I'm resigning from it because I'm going to be charged. And I said, please distance the firm from me, because the charges had nothing to do with McKinsey. I had already retired. It had nothing to do with McKinsey at all. When I resigned from everything, you know, when I was still, it was just a charge, right? When I resigned, people like Bill Gates said, no, there's a principle called you are innocent till you're proven guilty. I don't want you to resign. In fact, you please continue. The actions that McKinsey took were well before I had just been charged. I mean, so I'm still innocent till I'm proven guilty. And they took away my office, my secretary, and all that, which is a privilege they give to most former managing directors. So I think they went against two fundamental values. One is you're innocent till you're proven guilty. Second is McKinsey is a partnership. When your partners are down, you're supposed to help them, not kick them in their face. So I think it didn't feel right to me. It wasn't their values. So having said that, I think McKinsey is a fantastic firm. It's a value-driven firm. It's the world's best consultants, and I am a product of McKinsey, a professional product.
All right, Rajat, I have at least half an hour of questions left for you, but I'm going to wrap up in 1 minute.
Okay.
I have 10 questions, rapid fire, and I'd like you to answer them in a minute or less. Are you ready?
Okay.
Has anyone approached you for movie rights to your book?
No.
If they did, which actor would you like to play you?
Me.
Yeah. Real life biopics are all the rage in India now, or globally as well. Brad Pitt, perhaps, or Christian Bale?
Sorry?
Christian Bale, Brad Pitt.
I said I will play myself. What do you mean?
You would play yourself. Okay. Who's the next president of the US going to be? That's going to take a full minute, 5 minutes?
I'm afraid it might be Donald Trump.
All right. Who's the next Prime Minister of India going to be?
I have no idea.
Will McKinsey ever go out of business?
No.
Would you go back to McKinsey if they asked you really nicely?
I would do anything for McKinsey.
What is the most Bengaliest thing about you?
What is the most Bengaliest thing about me?
Yeah. That's low-hanging fish.
No. I speak Bengali whenever I get a chance. It reminds me of home.
What's the one thing about Bangalore that you really, really like?
I have to tell you, this may take a little more than 1 minute. But the last time I was in Bangalore was exactly 8 years, almost 8 years ago, a little over 8 years. And I had already known that I was going to be charged. I came to Bangalore on the invitation of Kiran Mazumdar, who's a good friend, to watch the one-day test match between England and India, which resulted in a draw. I'd never in my life seen a one-day cricket match which resulted in a draw. That was here. That was the best part of Bangalore.
So drawn cricket, one-day international is a nice part of Bangalore. Okay, I'm sorry I've taken much more time than was allotted to me.
Okay.
Thank you for being such a sport,
You're
Rajat
welcome.
Gupta.
You're welcome.
I'll hand the stage back to Payal now.